Hi everyone, I'm Linda Schacht, and I know many of you from your support of authors' dinners in the past. I'm honored to be part of this event to benefit the beloved Berkeley Public Library. I grew up in Berkeley, and I remember walking up from Berkeley High to study in the Central Branch. My children and now my 3 granddaughters are library lovers too, and I can't wait to bring those 3 girls to the new children's room when it opens soon. But now I want to tell you a story, a very Berkeley story, a very Berkeley Public Library story. The story begins in 1850 when this fellow, Francis Kittredge Shattuck, made his way from New York to the East Bay. Mr. Shattuck and other ambitious locals with names like Woolsey, Blake, Hillegas, and Durant settled in Berkeley when there were not yet any street names. Their names became Berkeley's street names. So Francis Kittredge Shattuck may sound familiar. The corner of Kittredge and Shattuck has been the location of the Berkeley Public Library since 1905. In 1856, Mr. Shattuck bought a square mile of land for $1.25 an acre along what is now known as Shattuck Avenue. Then he went back to New York and married a childhood friend, Rosa Morse. They returned to Berkeley and began to build things: banks, hotels, coal mines, the first railroad between Oakland and Berkeley, and this Victorian mansion on Shattuck Avenue. Eventually, the Shattocks rented, for $25 a month, 2 rooms to a group who wanted to establish a library in Berkeley. It opened in 1893 as the Holmes Library, because the first books in the collection, like this one, were by Oliver Wendell Holmes. But 2 rooms weren't enough. The Cal campus was growing. Most of its few hundred students were young men, attracted to the many corner saloons in Berkeley. The town's leaders thought a library would be a healthy and uplifting diversion. So pressure was building in Berkeley to establish a larger library. 500 school children wrote essays with titles such as My Ideal Library. In one of them, Leslie Dobbins, a 6th grader at Whittier School, wrote, "Our library is still only a little acorn, but we hope it will grow into such a sturdy oak as the Astor Library in New York City, which I read about in the Encyclopedia Britannica." And so the Holmes Library was renamed the Berkeley Public Library in 1895, but it needed a building. The city turned to Andrew Carnegie, who, among other less noble endeavors, had supported over 1,600 public libraries all over the country. Carnegie agreed to give the city $40,000, but only if someone else would give the city the land for the library. Francis Kittredge Shattuck had died by then, leaving an estate of $2 million. Rosa Shattuck inherited all of it, the Victorian mansion, and all that land along Shattuck Avenue. She was the wealthiest woman in Alameda County. Hearing of Carnegie's offer, Rosa Shattuck stepped up and donated her rose garden on the corner of Kittredge and Shattuck. With John Galen Howard as the architect, the library was built and opened in 1905. Rosa Shattuck died of a stroke 3 years later. She and Francis share this headstone at Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. Rosa's obituaries called her Mrs. Shattuck. They led with the fact that she had died, and then went on to praise her husband, or describe who would inherit her money and how much they would get. But it was Rosa Shattuck Morse, whose name is perpetuated by the Berkeley Public Library. And so the Library Foundation has named its major donor group the Rosa Shattuck Circle. It recognizes those of you who contribute $1,000 or more each year and want to join us in remembering Rosa Morse Shattuck, who gave up her rose garden and helped build a library. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something valuable. That is the currency your library trades in.